Hello, everyone. This is Ari Moshe Wolf of Heart and Soul Centered Astrology, and I'm here with my friend Gemini Brett of what do you call your work?
Well, the school of Earth astrology, and that I'm an Earth astrologer, I guess, is the thing that could most differentiate me.
Great. So last night, while Michelle and I and our family were driving home, I listened to Michelle and Gemini talking, and I heard Gemini say the words, "Well, this is a great time for an existential crisis and change." And I was thinking, it's true. And then I invited Gemini to have a conversation with me to unpack that and just dive deeply in our own way into the current transits. What's happening? What are the big movements? What is this change that I think we both see as really foundational right now? So we're going to have a conversation about that. So before I do, welcome Gemini. And would you like to share anything about your work and any current happenings happening on your end?
Sweet of you to ask, Ari. I'm happy to be here. And yeah, I mean, my work is devoted to finding more ways to bring astrology out of the mental domains alone and into the embodied experience. I'm a pretty brain-oriented character, so this is to help me in my own path as well. And I find that the ancient sister sciences of astronomy, especially like embodied astronomy, but sacred geometry, musical harmony, they really help bring us there. So the School of Astrology focuses on teaching and presenting and exploring astrology through those lenses. And so you can find out more about my school at geminibrett.com, where you can find all things about me, including the constellations community, which is just a really wonderful thing that's aligned a few years ago, where many stars align in constellations to share thoughts and hearts and things that I know you're up to as well, Ari. And since I likely will also share this conversation at my place, would you share some more about what you do and what's going alive in your work right now?
Absolutely. And aren't you offering your sessions at discount for the remainder of
I
this?
am through the rest of the year, through the holy days and such. So just at the sessions page at geminibrett.com, once you go through the whole scheduling thing, you can use the coupon code gratitude and save
So
12%.
anyone who is new to Gemini's work, check it out. What he brings forward is just a unique gem in and of itself, and you will discover that today for sure. So as always, I have my individual sessions available. My self-study training program is available for enrollment all year long. And I have a newsletter that I often send out and along with these videos where I articulate these teachings and write out these insights in article form. So you can check all of this out in the description below. I don't think I have any special events right now, but that will happen soon. Okay, so how about we start by just providing a visual overview of the current transits, just to kind of ground us in the two-dimensional representation of what's happening right now. So it's meaningful. We have really the entire month of November has been the month of stations, and right now Saturn is stationing direct. It's in the very beginning of its stationing process as we're talking. And then over this weekend, it's gonna move. And then on Sunday, just a few days later, we have Mercury stationing direct as well. So, I mean, that right there just speaks to a lot of powerful movement. And of course, you can see we have this ongoing grand water trine with Mercury and Saturn and Jupiter. And Mercury is going to move direct and kind of tighten and return to the exact trine. When we move into the next month, we're also going to see Neptune stationing direct soon thereafter. So we have a lot of really powerful movements happening in water. And of course, all of this is just before both Saturn and Neptune move into Aries and then cross into a new phase. And just to kind of give a quick visual of that week by week, we're looking at they cross each other by the time we come into February, but they all move into Aries by the early new year. So that's the basics from at least the water movement into Aries perspective. Of course, there are many other things going on. So I would like to start us off, Gemini, with your statement. And the first thought I had was, this would be a great title for a YouTube video, right? This is a great time for an existential crisis, colon, some kind of astrology. But then you also said, and change.
Mm.
And actually, with all of these planets stationing, I would actually say, really tuning in, that maybe the existential crisis is sort of towards, many of us might find ourselves more towards not necessarily the end of it, but there's some sort of movement happening within that existential reality. So I'd love to hear you speak about that. How do you interpret this?
Yeah, I was just wondering as you were speaking, like, are change and existential crisis synonyms, or at least bedmates, you know? Yeah, we have such amazing, significant transitions in a way fully committed or finalizing this year. As you were just sharing with Saturn and Neptune stationing direct in Pisces, it's going to be their final months in that sign. And Saturn spends 2.5 years-ish in the sign, and it's a big deal, but less than Neptune because Neptune moves so slowly. Like Neptune's been in Pisces for a long time and had already moved into Aries and retrograded back into the Pisces seas, but now comes to Aries and commits to Aries for a good amount of years. And so we're in the midst of that transition. As we know, Pluto spent many, many years in Capricorn and then danced across the Aquarius cusp and back into Taurus or sorry, Capricorn, and now is committed to Aquarius to stay. But these other planets are still in the midst of change, like you showed in the chart that Uranus is now retrograde in the last degrees of Taurus, right? It's kind of like encore performance on that Earth stage. And then, as we know, Uranus will now fully commit to Gemini for some years ahead as well. So we're feeling those dynamic changes that are easy to see. There's some that are a little bit more difficult to see, like Mercury will do the dances, will do the retrograde loops in signs of the same element for a year or two. And Mercury's now just transitioning in this retrograde cycle that we're communicating during from 6 fire sign cycles, so like 2 years of fire sign cycles, to about 2 years of water sign cycles, right? So that's interesting that that's also happening in this transformation. I actually feel like that one's going to keep us in the waters, keep us in the heart in a way for these shifts, which of course is important. The art of the chart starts in the heart. All good things do. The Venus star, right? So Venus, depending on how you play, is either currently in an Aries cycle or in a Pisces cycle. And that just depends upon the way that we work with these Venus cycles. It's a
Like the
really
starting
great transformation. So if you look back around the equinox of 2025, Ari, or just ask the
point.
computer to give us retrograde Venus conjunct Sun.
Okay, I'll do that while you're talking. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I could do that one as well. You'll see that Venus came between Earth and the Sun in the sign of Aries in March of 2025. And many of us use that as the astronomical indication for a new Venus.
Hmm.
And this idea that when Venus comes between Earth and the Sun, like a new moon can, right? That's like there's a new energy, a new devotion to exploring the archetypal Venus for what really is a 19-month cycle as Venus goes back behind the Sun before she comes between Earth and the Sun again. But some, like my first teachers, Daniel Jamario and Kaylin Castell, then at the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, or others like Adam Gainsberg, they prefer, instead of using the exact conjunction of Venus and the Sun, retrograde Venus and the Sun, so Venus between Earth and the Sun, like that, instead of using the conjunction degree, they'll use a degree when Venus is 10 degrees away from the Sun.
Hmm.
And interesting, are you and I are speaking at a time with Venus in 10 degrees from the Sun. But if you look at like when Venus is passing Earth by, and all retrogrades are passings, right? Either Earth passing the slower planets, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and beyond, or the faster planets, Mercury and Venus, passing us, right? So only Mercury and Venus can, like a new moon, get between us and the Sun. And I've come to favor that conjunction date, like the one that's on your screen. But many work with a timing that happens about a week later. So you could just move some days forward, Ari. Looking at when Venus is 10 degrees away from the sun.
I got a glitch in my solar fire, so when I animate it,
It's not happening.
what was the date? That was like March 22nd, right?
Yeah, or I could share my screen if you want.
Sure.
Um, yeah, let me do that.
Okay.
Requesting permission from control.
Permission granted.
Thank you. So let's push these buttons again.
So for everyone, just so everyone understands, this is the conjunction that happens with Venus and the Sun while Venus is in its retrograde movement.
Right. And when Venus is retrograde, it means Venus is passing Earth by, transitioning from evening star to morning star. Like it's a big deal when planets get into the flames of the sun, into the combustion, right? So and maybe we'll circle back to the Sagittarius new moon to come, because I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of indications in the coming lunation. You'll see I have galactic center in there for that reason, that the new moon will conjoin galactic center. It'd be fun to speak about that because there's a great, great, great cycle happening that I'll get back to. Um,
Cool.
but let's go back in time and I will ask this thing to show me Venus conjoined the sun. And yeah, so here is this retrograde Venus conjunct the sun, March 22nd, 2025. I'm just wanting to display things a little differently here, so please bear with me a minute. All right. So yeah, if we go like 6, 7 days later, that's when you get to Venus 10 degrees from the sun. And that's a decent rule for visible Venus. In the
Right.
tradition, under the beams of the sun, described a planet within 15 degrees on either side of the sun, right? And this is a beautiful thing. It's one of the reasons why I'm really attracted to ancient astrology. Some of the languaging and fatalistic approach can be difficult for me, but there is such a deep connection to an embodied experience of the living sky, which is what I'm about, you know? So when you watch the sunset, right, of course it gets dark up high first, right? Because the sun sets and there's still light on the horizon. Like you're actually experiencing the sun's beams, right? And really epic sunset, you get like the chakra colors, right? You'll get the
Mhm.
orange right on the horizon, or red, and then the orange. And that red bit is the combustion zone. So in the Hellenistic tradition, when a planet's within like 8.5 degrees of the sun, they're now combust. They're in that fiery red stuff, right? So the sun sets and the
So cool. I
beams
never thought of it
follow.
that way.
Right. Or when we watch a sunrise, right? The beams rise before the sun rises, right? And interestingly, if you add 15 degrees to either side of the sun,
Chakra is it in?
you get a sign.
What's that?
You get 30 degrees, you get a sign.
Okay.
It's like a fun way to consider, why do we divide the circle into these 12 signs of 30 degrees? There's many ways to get there, right? Many involve the moon, but that's an interesting one. Anyway, typically it was said that when planets are within 15 degrees of the sun, they can't be seen. And for me, that's actually like a challenging thing because like I'll miss Venus. Venus right now is a morning star, but she's in direct motion and 10 degrees from the sun. And this is like a good kind of global number to use, 10 degrees for Venus, because she's so bright, the 15-degree rule just doesn't apply. When Venus
You
is
can see
about,
Venus within 10 degrees.
yeah, without when 10 degrees, it's a good global rule. Now, I've seen Venus when she's only 1 degree away. And it's like
What?
because that's in longitude when we cast the charts, we're only looking at the sun's path.
Got it. Okay.
But Venus can do this. Venus can get 8.5 degrees away from the sun by latitude.
Meaning, so it can deviate from the ecliptic. So is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Mercury and
Let me
Venus.
let me clarify something for everyone because this is a helpful translation for those that may be having difficulty following. Um, the reason why a lot of people consider the sort of star point of that Venus Sun relationship when Venus has gone retrograde behind the Sun, meaning moving further back in the zodiac, is because that's the first point where you can say you can actually begin to see Venus as a morning star. So if you look at the horizon, you have all the lights that Gemini was speaking about. you'll actually see Venus rising as this really beautiful star before the sun comes up. So it's like the emergence, the beginning of that Venusian appearance. That's why a lot of people consider that 10-degree separation as the official star point.
Right. So in the ancient times, or those who are practicing with like lunisolar calendars, as you yourself do, Ari, right? The new moon, like the moon sun conjunction, as we call it, wasn't seen as the new moon.
But
That's
it
a
was when you
no
could
moon,
first see it.
right? Like you can't see that. So the old tables talk about like one of the main roles of the astronomer, the astrologer, was to keep the calendar, keep the days, and the new moon begins when in the sunset west we see that sliver crescent, right? Like that smile of the moon. I always like to say is kind of shining like reflections that she survived her monthly fire trial. She's come back. And this is why in a lot of the ancient calendars, days, if you can believe it, begin at sunset.
That's
Because
right.
if you want to align your month with the phases of the moon, that's where you see the maiden moon. That's where you see the young moon in the sunset sky, right? And that would be like a visible new moon, an experience of new moon. So many calendars that are tuned, like the Hebrew calendar or Chinese, solely lunar calendar to the phases of the moon, instead of beginning the month with the moon sun conjunction, you begin when the moon's 15-ish degrees away, and therefore the moon at sunset will be seen in her youngest phase in the west, right? And so the same idea would apply to other planets who we can see with our eyes, right? Like modern astrology, many very interested in like Pluto, who you'll never see, right? And so are these rules going to apply in that regard? But for Venus, again, there is a time every 19 months-ish, every 583 days, 583.92, but who's counting? That Venus comes between Earth and Sun. And so some of us could see that as like a new Venus. And then there's other times where because that Venus can't be seen at all, right? She's in the flames of the sun. We might wait for this time when Venus is now 10 degrees away. So again, because Venus isn't on the path of the sun and actually can loop pretty far from the sun's path from the ecliptic, like further than the moon can.
Right.
Venus creates these experiences, and 2025 was one of them, where even though she's conjunct the sun in the chart, she's like 8.5 degrees away by
Interesting.
latitude. It's like
Yeah.
saying that New York and Machu Picchu are conjunct,
Right. Oh, interesting.
right?
Yeah.
Like latitude matters, right? And so I have seen Venus where the chart suggests I cannot.
I just gotta stop. Latitude matters needs to become like the next catchphrase for the new wave of astrology, where it's like this is one of the things that I love about your work, and I haven't really caught on to this so much in my own practice, but there are more literally more dimensions from which we can look at and internalize and map Gemini to map the cosmos. And it's very common for the mind and our own conditioning to become overly familiar with the maps that we know. But latitude matters. I mean, there's more than just longitude. There are other facets to understand planetary relationship. So I really appreciate, and I think there's so much that is yet to evolve um, in the larger, greater knowledge of astrology and how we think about the cosmos. So I just wanted to insert that. Okay. I wanted to continue, but also I want to make sure we reel back into how Venus right now, how all the things that you're sharing is relevant to the current Venus and what's going on now. So I just want to make sure that
Absolutely. And to just these great cycles of change, right? So let me just, while we got so technical, just show this to people. This is Stellarium Astronomy software, which is so amazing. And so here is the Venus Sun conjunction on March 22nd of 2022. And so what we're saying is like if you draw just as we
can you
would
take a moment
for
and define what is that green line? Is that the Earth's
that's the
horizon or
ground.
yeah.
Okay. And so this is the ecliptic, the sun's path in yellow.
Okay.
But all of the planets, they have their own paths. Now, it would be kind of madness if we tried to chart that, right? And so what we do is we draw them down to or up to the sun's path, right? When you hear things like, oh, Sirius is at 14 Cancer, well, Sirius is 40 degrees away. So you're
Mm,
drawing a really long line. right? But like I could say that my longitude on Earth is the same as Seattle, Washington, where I used to live. Now I'm in Berkeley, California, but we're having a very different experience, right? We're just the same distance from the prime meridian, if you feel like in any way that's prime. So at the time of this particular Venus Sun conjunction, it's definitely not always like this. This is Venus's path here shown in green, which doesn't distance itself too far from the sun because, we're looking at a planet whose orbital path is between ours and the light, right? And so you're seeing Venus, who just can get like maximum 48 degrees to the eastern side of the sun or 48 degrees to the western side of the sun. So this is actually the time of the conjunction, which is a trip. And so we're drawing these like
Far away.
lines to the ecliptic and saying, oh, Venus is there, like where the sun is. Right. But again, like latitude matters, right? At this particular, and this is true in the sign of Aries and in the sign of Libra in our day and age, like these are places where Venus can be very far from the sun when also conjunct the sun. And so
One
this
brief translation for everyone to help also conceive of this. If I hold my two thumbs like this, you can say, of course, they're not conjunct. But if I turn my body, right, and I look at it from this angle, it looks conjunct, right? So
but they are.
so that's both exist, right? They're right like this, but then, so that's a part of how we're thinking of the significance of both longitude and latitude from this angle.
Yeah, it works a little differently than that, but yes, and it's a
Overly
cool, and it's a
simplifying, meaning
yeah,
like
and it's a cool metaphor,
if
right?
you're
So
only
anyway,
considering one perspective, you're going to think that conjunction is a conjunction.
so this changed my, well, religion. Yes, because if we
Right.
use the conjunction itself, you can see that it happened in the sign of Aries, right? But if we use this time when Venus is separate by 10 degrees as a rule for when Venus becomes visible, right? Needing to be distant from the sun by 10 degrees. Let's just get Venus and the sun here. Then that's in Pisces.
Mhm.
And why does that matter? Well, let me show you the conjunction again. And for those of you who have studied the Venus star, because what happens is Venus will come between Earth and the sun 19 months later, right? This is direct Venus. So this is Venus back behind the sun.
This coming up. This is just in a month
This
from
is
now.
happening January 6th, and Mars is there. It's actually an amazing chart, right? But here, let me show you next year, and this is another interesting one. Venus coming between Earth and the sun. So this is retrograde Venus indicated by red font in the software right now, right? So in the sign of Scorpio, in the very first degree of Scorpio. And one of the reasons why that's a big deal is like, let me show you the 10-degree separation. Like that will happen not with Venus in Libra, but with Venus in the sign of Scorpio, sorry, not in Scorpio, but in Libra. So if you're using 10 degrees as the rule, then you're going to say, oh, well, Venus is starting this cycle actually in Libra, not in Scorpio. I just want to show a few more things, and then I promise you I'll bring this back to where we began. So that cycle I call it a Scorpio now, Leo cycle. Venus between us and the sun in Scorpio, and then back behind the sun for kind of like a death and a rebirth in Leo for that cycle. I call this cycle a Gemini Aries cycle. And this one, a Capricorn Libra cycle. All right, and this one, a Leo Gemini cycle. Now, 8 years after 2025, in 2033, you'll
Mhm.
see that there's a conjunction again in the sign of Aries, right? So this is the Venus star, Aries, Scorpio, Gemini, Capricorn, Leo, Aries. You can
Uh, uh,
see that for an Earth zodiac, right? Venus and the Sun create a five-pointed star, a pentacle in the zodiac over the course of 8 Earth years, which is 13 Venus years. And then you get the 5, 8, 13, which if you've studied your golden numbers is part of the Fibonacci sequence and on we can go. Anyway, let me show you 8 years after this time in 2033, because that will be the next time when Venus aligns between Earth and the Sun here around the equinox again.
and we'll
But
probably be in Pisces,
at
right?
that time, as you just accurately said, yeah, we're going to have a Pisces star point, okay?
Mhm.
And by the way, the point that's been in Libra, and or sorry, in Scorpio, right? So we see this Venus between Earth and the Sun in Scorpio, October 23rd, 2026. Well, 8 years later, that's going to happen in Libra. Okay.
Quick question for you, Gemini. Maybe you're
Yeah,
getting there.
I'm getting there.
I bet you are. I know they move really slowly. So this is where you're going. How long will it actually take for a star point to fully shift to a new sign?
Right. So to bring people where we were from Earth's point of view, Venus comes between the sun every 19 months in those what we call they call it inferior, which means below, or I prefer interior conjunction. Over the course of the 8 years, this draws this five-pointed star in the zodiac. Well, the five-pointed star itself very slowly retrogrades. And to answer your question, Ari, each of the star points will spend about 100, 104 years in a
What?
sign, right? And so we are currently in a time where the cycles have been Aries, Scorpio, Gemini, Capricorn, Leo. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, traditionally, not only Aries, but Scorpio, these are the homes of Mars. And
Hmm.
then Capricorn traditionally is a place where Mars is said to be an honored guest or exalted, right? So, like, it's been an interesting kind of Martian period for the Venus star because three of the five star points have been exploring signs associated with Mars in the code of the tradition, right? Now, the Aries point, after 100 plus years, is precessing to Pisces, where Venus is said to be exalted, right? And specifically in a very late degree of Pisces, the 28th degree. And the Scorpio is becoming Libra, right? So that kind of like a homecoming for Venus. And then eventually, it's going to be a while, but the point that's now in Gemini will precess back to Taurus. So there will be kind of an epoch ahead, and it's happening, the transition's happening now, where we're moving to from Aries Scorpio, right, into Pisces Libra. And depending upon, this is why we got so technical, depending on how you do the cycle, those shifts are happening Scorpio to Libra in like 8 years from next in like 2034. And the Aries to Pisces 16 years from 2025. So what, 2041?
Yeah,
But if you're using the 10-degree rule, and some great astrologers are,
it's already happened.
and it's already happened. So
Yeah.
importantly, we are in the time of that transition as well. And that 100-year period, it's more like that's longer than Pluto in a sign, or longer than Neptune or
That's,
Uranus in a sign. It's a big deal.
I want to share a quick observation on that, or with a strong emphasis currently for so many decades now in we have Aries, Capricorn, Leo, Scorpio, Gemini, with two of those signs moving now into Pisces and Libra. Aries to Pisces, Scorpio to Libra. You mentioned the traditional rulership of Mars. In my, I use Pluto and Mars, but one way or another, Pluto and Mars are quite intense. And they're octaves of one another. Now we're moving into Pisces and Libra, which is a very different, this is a Venusian energy. Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. So that's really fascinating that we're moving into a long, many decades period of a strong Venus star emphasis in a much more Neptunian Venusian energy as opposed to a more Plutonian Martian energy.
Yeah, and I mean, think about what will change.
And then even Taurus will eventually come in there as well from Gemini.
And especially considering it is a Venus cycle, right? And so there's something about Venus kind of getting back to the nature. Now it's like been really important. Like if you look at like the suffrage movement in the United States, right? A lot of that was there was a significant energy boost from these Venus star points moving into Aries and moving into Scorpio, right? There's something about fighting the good fight that's necessary. It's not like it's not still necessary. I mean,
When did it move into, it seems like the Scorpio Aries are all more or less aligned in time. When did that happen?
about 100 years ago.
Okay,
Um, Yeah, let's leave it there so we don't spend time going to
sure.
find the exact times because I can't say them right now. But check this out. Like there have been Venus from a Leo cycle to an Aries cycle. So that shift happened in March of 2025. Well, the last time that happened was 8 years before.
Hmm.
Interestingly, each of these times Trump is elected president, right? And there's marches and all these powerful demonstrations, right? We really feel that energy, and specifically kind of from the Venusian side. All right, so for the context of this conversation, I just wanted to add that to the mix of there are some very powerful transitions that we are currently engaged with. There's one other thing I'll share, and this is the big one. And this is why I'm just so grateful that I began my study with Daniel Gemario, then at the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. Daniel's now at the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, which is named after something you can't quite see on the screen, okay? But this is the Sagittarius new moon to come. So it's December 19th, 2025, and in some places it'll be December 20th across the date line. This is what it looks like astronomically. And we're just going to focus in on the sun. Now, latitude matters, right? So I'm not in the exact moment of the new moon here just because the way I wanted to show it on the screen. But you see, like, from one day to the next, the moon's going to be passing the sun. Let's actually just watch the moon travel here. And I think this will help. The moon's actually going to pass right over the galactic center, which the sun cannot do, because the galactic center lives 5 degrees south of the sun's path, right? It's not on the ecliptic. It's not on the sun's path. Well, the moon has her own path, right? The nodes are the places where the moon's path crosses that of the sun. And at this time, and every time we're in, this is kind of a long story, but what's called a lunar standstill period, in our day and age, the moon can pass over galactic center. And this one's a little bit more like the example you were doing with the fingers before. There's something about parallax. Depending on where on Earth you're looking from, on this day, the moon will pass over galactic center. Now, nobody's going to see it because it's with the sun, right? And so that's the idea that a new moon is like a no moon. But it's also showing us just something where we've already been, which is that, I'm going to keep moving through time, which is that latitude matters, right? Not every new moon, as we know, is in occultation or in eclipse, right? And this one is just about as far from it as you can get because the moon is conjoining the sun square to the nodes, which I know is a really significant part of your work, Ari, right? So here's sunrise, and we're not seeing any of this stuff until I dim the lights. And the software really helps us play. Well, what I want you to see, and let me zoom out here, that there is this particularly powerful place of the heavens, which sadly most of us don't get to see in the sky with our eyes because of light pollution, right? And we can't see it this time of the year anywhere because of the light pollution by the biggest light, which is the sun. But this is the Milky Way band, right? And the galactic center is thought to be this like supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy, right? That is like the sun of our sun. It's like all the stars of the Milky Way are orbiting that, right? So it's like the heart of this huge galaxy, right? Like galactic, I don't know, neighborhood, if you will. And the thing to see here is like, look at this Capricorn glyph, all right? So Capricorn sign does not mean Capricorn constellation. That's a
Help us identify the Capricorn glyph.
Do you see that right there? Let me take the planets away. It's pretty small and I can't make it bigger.
Okay.
It's really cool that Stellarium will actually use these glyphs to define important cardinal
Okay, right.
cusps of the
Really small.
tropical
Right.
zodiac.
Yeah.
I mean, technically what Capricorn is, 0 Capricorn, the Tropic of Capricorn is the point that is furthest south of the equator. I really don't want to get so technical here, but I guess that's what's going to go down. So
And
it's
just to
not
clarify
about
for everyone,
constellations.
this is the tropical Capricorn. It's not about constellations, what he's pointing
Right. Like constellations are also amazing. And for example, the arrow of the archer, the stinger of the scorpion, and the knee of the serpent bearer, they all triangulate galactic center, which is an amazing truth,
out.
right? But you'll see here that in our day and age, and this changes with precession, the solstice point I call it solstice. When the sun gets there, it's the southern extreme, and therefore in the northern hemisphere, low in the sky, in the southern hemisphere, high, right? It's south of the equator. In our day and age, and let me just show you, like, I don't know, here's 2,000 years ago. Whoa, that's not what we meant to do. How do we bring that stuff back? I might have to quit and start again because I forgot what button.
Well, you were definitely about to go on a slight tangent.
Well, yeah, so the important thing that I want to share is this. The solstices and my work and the whole idea of astrology, it's really based upon my findings and or rediscovery or just stumbling upon the truth that the tropical zodiac, like so many systems of ancient wisdom traditions, is a directional device. It is directionally aligned. Okay, so Earth's North Pole points towards zero Cancer.
Right.
Moon entering Cancer is this, right? Moon entering Capricorn is this. When Moon gets to Earth's South Pole, and it can't ever go there, but to where on the ecliptic, where on our orbital path or the Moon's orbital path, when the Moon gets south of Earth, that's the Moon entering Capricorn, and a couple weeks later into Cancer. It's just literally tied, I like to say, to Gaia's spine or to the sword of our stone or to the world tree, to our directional rotational axis. That's the tropical zodiac, right? And so when the sun enters Cancer, right, because the Earth is orbiting the sun shines directly above the Tropic of Cancer. Like that's how the thing works, okay? Anyway, the third motion of Earth, the precession of the axis, arranges for not north on Earth, like that's Santa's place no matter what, but like where that is pointing in space. Like Polaris is not always above our North Pole. This changes over this 26-ish thousand year great cycle called precession, right? And we happen to be alive at a most powerful time, indicated by the very real and experiential truth that the poles and therefore the solstices are currently passing through the Milky Way plane, right? The Milky Way band, I should say, right? Like the river of stars. So it can only happen like it is right now every 26,000 years. And like this is like the work of well, my teacher Daniel Jamario, but also John Major Jenkins wrote this wonderful book called Galactic Alignment, which I recommend for any mystic, especially those who have been called to the study of the stars like you and me. Galactic Alignment, John Major Jenkins, amazing.
They were really popular around 2012. I remember those titles.
He was, and John, who sadly passed away not long after, really was strong Pisces, Mr. Jenkins. And John really felt the weight of his words being edited and twisted in such a way
Huh.
that in the many interviews he gave during this time of the 2012 period, that his words were twisted to make it sound like he was one of the many researchers contributing to the idea that the great cataclysms were coming because the Mayan calendar and the 13 Baktuns predicted this. And this isn't what John was about. But he did show in his work very clear evidence to support his theory that the 2012 transition of the Mayan calendar was about this solstice alignment to the Milky Way, which for the Maya in a very particular place looked like Chibolba Bay, or the passage to the underworld. And when the sun is reborn out of the underworld, this speaks about like very great, powerful change and prophecy. So I just wanted to enter that. I know that's a lot, but like within these great changes that we can see when we're tracking these outer, slower moving planets through the zodiac, like Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, all changing now and all fascinating aligned in this great sextile fan, right? So changing around the same time and changing also in like aspect to one another and in a midpoint picture and all sorts of other amazing things there, right? The Venus star, it's like longer periods of time for these changes, and not only two of the 5 points changing, and usually two of the 5 change simultaneously, but changing in a very archetypally powerful way, as we express, because out of Aries into Pisces, out of Scorpio into Libra, right? And all of this within this amazing context of the turning of the ages. And
Now,
that one,
let me clarify a piece. So if you can go back to your share even, how does the Sag new moon with its longitudinal conjunction with galactic center, is that because that's in the Milky Way? Is that a part of the river of stars that you were
yeah,
referring to?
absolutely.
Okay.
So,
So then if I'll let me translate this and you can correct me or clarify what I'm saying. This is currently where the actual inter a meeting point of tropical what we call sorry the solstice point. This is currently uh conjunct or aligned with this galactic center within the river of stars, which is where the new moon is happening. Do I got that right?
yes, yeah. And so when we have each year now the solstices, there's two places where the sun's path crosses the Milky Way band. So
Okay.
one is there at the pointing of the stinger and the arrow at galactic center. And there's another cross of the ecliptic, which is like the plane of our solar system, right? It's Earth, Sun, and the Milky Way band, which is like the plane of our galaxy, right? You can think about like the way like our city and our neighborhood intersect, right? Like think about that like politically or something, right? Um, like that's now in this time, and it only happens like this every 26,000 years, or you only have the Milky Way band at equinoxes or solstice alignments about every 6,500 years. This is like what Daniel Gemario sees as the astronomical indication of the most kind of significant energetic opportunities for archetypal evolution. Like the whole map is changing. We are here to rewrite the story. That would be the idea. I want to share this time lapse that I recorded in Maui in the volcano fields earlier. This was in 2024.
Ah,
So there's the galactic center, right? So if you're away from the city lights, it is just undeniably like the most mystical, magical, and powerful place of the sky. This is the stinger of the scorpion here. And the arrow of the archer, like pointing to that center of the galaxy. You can see it as the serpent biting its own tail, like the great Ouroboros of the river of stars that surrounds us. And it's always there and it's always powerful and magical. But as the solstices are now moving there, there's something about aligning in a way like the heart and the spine of Earth, and therefore these like cardinal cusps, the cardinal directions of the tropical zodiac, which is it's itself directional, like into this most magical place. Now that's happening for your whole life. It was centered like specifically the solstices moving across the galactic crosses, which by the way are not galactic center. Like galactic center is off of the ecliptic. It's radio telescoped measured. It's not something you see with your eyes. But if you know the sun's path, which we can find by tracing planets, and you can see that heart or the main equator of the galactic band, the Milky Way, you can see where they like the cross.
when was the midpoint of that alignment? Like the
May of 1999.
oh, fascinating.
Yeah. And so Daniel adds like 36 degrees before and 36 after, or sorry,
Both
36 years before 99 and 36 after, because
interesting.
precession is at a rate of about a degree every 72 years.
It's actually increasing.
Yeah, so 36 on one and the other side would give you like, about a degree of precession, and the sun's like half a degree of a disk to our eye. So like you could add 25 and subtract whatever, regardless, we are in it, right? Like we are right in this thing. And by the way, it's not May 99, it's May 98. But
Okay.
like we can use that as a center point. It's happening now. And we can see other different prophetic traditions. Like some suggest this is a time where we're now moving out of Kali Yuga. Some say that's not going to be for gazillions of years, but there's some interesting researchers that's saying that's now. There's many different researchers, and Ari, you've spent some time with many of them, so maybe you want to bring some of that in. But that really talk about this as like this is it. This is the change.
I mean, so from that modeling, if we use that, and just for everyone to appreciate the entirety of astrology on every scale, is from one perspective the study of orb, because there's always a moment of exactness with whatever movements we're tracking, but our lived experience is never a moment. It's always a process. So I love having that. I'm sure there are other ways to think of it, but that perspective. Okay, in 88, we had sort of the midpoint of galactic center being aligned with this sorry the solstice point being aligned with the river of stars and exactly aligned with the galactic center. 2012 then would be so 12 20, yeah, that's like that would be half of 36 years from that point of 1998. So that's really interesting. In the system that I follow, we are in what's called the Dwapara Yuga, which is the age where humanity begins to realize and apply some of the universal principles of nature. So we're in the Kali Yuga, there's like the dimmest level of consciousness, which in the mapping that I follow from Sri Yukteswar, you can say that around 500 or so AD, we were at the apex, the lowest point in this 24,000 year cycle, where there's a total forgetting, you can say, of the principles of reality and knowledge of truth. And so when we forget what we are, when we forget our nature, which we can all personally relate to, when we don't know what's true, when we feel far from the principles of reality, we'll use force. Right? We become more aggressive because we don't understand the subtle harmonics and the subtle principles from which all things come into movement. So we're not in resonance with the principles of reality. So there's a lot of force, a lot of sort of egocentric and, of course, more ethnocentric and separatist kinds of ways of thinking. We've moved into this new age around, the Renaissance. But again, orbs. There's never really a defined moment in reality. It's always a transitional process. And that's really helpful to think of that. Uh, Most people would say that we're not officially in the age of Aquarius, and you can probably speak to this more. I mean, the constellations themselves, again, they overlap in many cases, and they're not equal 30-degree divisions. But moving into this new age, we're in an accelerated way beginning to see the growth of a new level of consciousness. And it always happens that, and this is a very good way to think about even the current Pisces, Saturn, Neptune, even the Aries into Pisces transition with Venus. At that transitional point, there's almost a heightened duality. I always find this to be so with any kind of transitional movement from one phase to another, where we're kind of in that sort of amorphous in between place, where the dualities between where we've been and where we're going become the most heightened because something new is beginning to emerge. And so we're getting these. I mean, most people listening, we've all had deep spiritual realizations, and we also have become aware of some more of the subtle universal truths of reality. And that's a very promising thing to have realized that there's
Right.
something better than what we've known. And yet the old paradigm is incredibly active right now. Almost it can even feel more real, more alive. But I think the heightened duality is exactly what we see during this age. And I'll just say this point for reasons that maybe we'll get to if we have time. I, for a while, have actually seen the decade, the first half of 2030, as being that time where humanity actually begins to make more of a palpable shift towards the new. It's almost like that becomes more real than where we're coming from. And we can talk about that later, but yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I mean, it would feel as if the force of the old guard is doing everything possible to try to keep people in the spell. And, that's kind of where it becomes interesting. I mean, it's hard not to get tied to this idea that the calendar flips and everybody wakes up,
Right.
right? But at the same
That kind of way
time,
of thinking also strips us of our own agency and process of growth and learning. It's like something will happen and will change. It's a process. We have to actually fully go through it ourselves.
absolutely. I mean, aligning to that type of waiting is kind of like waiting for the savior to come or
Exactly.
whatever, right? And it really takes personal agency away, as you said, you know. And so like we can encounter so many amazing people who themselves are going through these just unspeakable transitions in their lives. And you and I hold space for this daily, right? And this is it, that's just like that's the time that we are in. And there's so many different systems that have pointed to now, and I appreciate that there is this astronomical evidence for, yeah, it's
Mm.
happening. So to just address a question that you kind of brought in earlier, like when is the dawning of the age of Aquarius? This is an app that I'm working on right now where you
Brilliant.
can pick a date. Like this is
What a
for
service.
now. Actually, this is like May of 98, 99. So 98 would have been the time when when the solstice axis here was most aligned with this galactic cross, which is what where the Milky Way band again like crosses the sun's path, and then down here the solstice axis
Just
is.
take a minute and translate for those that the inner circle is the constellations and the outer are the signs.
Well, there's three. Okay, so
Yeah.
the inner circle is the tropical zodiac, shown by the glyphs here, which is
Okay.
aligned to the cardinal directions. All right, here we have the constellations embracing the ecliptic plane, the constellations of the zodiac. And then on the very outer, this would be a sidereal zodiac.
Okay.
So I can click here
Got it.
and show, instead of words like Capricorn and Aquarius, sea goat and water
Beautiful.
bearer. Like
Beautiful.
I was taught to use words like Scorpion and Archer for constellations, and words like Scorpio and Sagittarius for signs, because they're very different things. But many choose to align their signs more to the stars. The idea of a sidereal zodiac, which is definitely not constellational, because the
Right.
constellations of the zodiac do not divide the sun's path, the ecliptic, into 12 slices of 30 degrees each. Like the priestess, for example, spreads more than 47 degrees of ecliptic arc, so
Mm.
more than a sign and a half. And the mighty ram is only like 15 degrees, right?
Huh.
So there are many different systems, and this is the idea of I am Namsha. There's 1,000 more than these, many different systems in this debate of like, okay, let's instead, because 12ness is real, and we want to be able to use this not as some, silly clock with different distances between the dashes on the face, right? As a way to kind of keep time, space. Like, let's divide the circle into 12 slices. The tropical zodiac does that from Earth's directions. The sidereal zodiac, you have to pick a star. So this is a zodiac, and there's many that configure zero, sidereal, Libra, to the star called Alpha Virgo, or Spica, or in India they call this Chitra.
Huh.
And so there's like a true Chitra zodiac, which will say, okay, like we're going to use that star to define our cusps, right? So all of this comes into this argument of when is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, because we're going to look at when the east point, and that's tropically the cusp of Pisces and Aries. You see, that point is due east of the center of the earth, and that therefore it works like a global ascendant. As we track that, like let me show you, 100 years before this time. I'm going back in hundreds of years, and you can
Sure.
see that the relationships are slowly changing, right? So like here we are.
Looks like you're going forwards.
I am going forward, which is weird. So as I said, we're working on this,
Working it out. Yeah, yeah.
right? But this will change. And the idea, let me go to today, of when does this.
And by the for everyone, going forwards will be going backwards because it's a regressed movement.
Unless you're a tropical astrologer like us, because you can either consider the tropical zodiac, and therefore the cardinal points, which are aligned to Earth's cardinal directions, precessing or moving backwards through the constellations of the zodiac, or if you prefer equal time-based ages through sidereal cusps.
Mm.
But sidereal cusp will vary significantly based upon which I am Namsha you choose, okay? Um, But we can think of the tropical zodiac, Earth's directions, precessing through the stars and sidereal signs, or, and this is how I have this aligned, we can think of those stars and sidereal signs processing or moving forward through the tropical zodiac. So, for example, and now we have the Pleiades who are moving after like 2160-ish years through the sign of Taurus into tropical Gemini,
Mm.
right? Or in 2011, Regulus, the heart of the lion, moved from Leo, where it certainly feels like it belongs, right, into tropical Virgo. So we can think of this either as the precession of the equinoxes, which are the, Pisces, Aries, and the Virgo Libra cusps, and therefore all of the sign cusps through the stars and sidereal signs, or we can think of the stars processing, marching
Interesting
forward
method for
against
that.
the cardinal directions, which I
So
prefer because I'm like,
according to your mapping, when would we officially enter Aquarius from the perspective of aligning with the actual constellation?
yeah, right. So, but is that what the criterion is? But so if that
Or
is
is it aligning with
not
the
going to
actual,
be,
is it aligning with the sidereal? Is that how it's usually mapped?
that's how I would map it
Okay.
because I would prefer for the ages to, like the signs,
Okay.
have equality. But maybe that's not how it works. So to answer your question,
I know the Vedic
constellationally,
system was using sidereal, it wasn't using constellation. So,
right. And constellationally, it's going to be like 3000 AD before the East Point like gets into kind of the water stream of
yeah,
the water bearer,
sure,
or like
sure, sure.
3300 when we have a kind of clear alignment. Whereas the the movement with from sidereal Pisces to sidereal Aquarius, it completely depends upon which sidereal zodiac you prefer.
Okay, there you go.
The whole idea of like Daniel's work, and there's something I call the Giamario I am Namcha, which is like, oh no, like, it makes sense to align a tropical zodiac or a zodiac to this north point. Like that's what the tropical zodiac is, right? And or we could look at it as the intersection. The sphere doesn't do it as well as some others. We could look at it as the intersection of the equator and the ecliptic. That's what the equinox points are. So the equator, the plane of our day, right? And the ecliptic is the plane of our year, right? So we spin every day, and that's along the plane of the equator. And we orbit every year, and that's the plane of the ecliptic. And those two intersect at the equinox points, right?
Mhm.
And the Pisces Aries point is due east of the center of Earth, which is a little harder to see because it's not east of California or New York, right? It's the east of Earth's center, which is where we measure astrology from. So if we look to the heavens, how about like a crossing point for greater spheres, if you will? And one would be the ecliptic in the Milky Way band, which just as these two bracelets have two crossing points, one is where the stinger of the scorpion and the arrow of the archer near the galactic center. And it's not right at the galactic center of the cross, it's like the visible cross, which while galactic center is like 27 tropical Sagittarius now, the visible cross is at 0 Capricorn. And again, that perfected in May of 98, right? On the other side, where we now have 0 tropical Cancer, like on the north side, the North Pole is currently precessing through the Milky Way band opposite galactic center, which is on the club of Orion. And there's all of these prophecies about the hand of the high man in the Celtic tradition, for example. I hear it in the Bible, and on we could go. I see it in the paintings of Washington, D.C., but let's leave that aside. So anyway, there's like this huge thing saying you have literally incarnated at a time of highest importance where we seed people, to use Rudier's speech, have the opportunity to write the new stories. Okay, so that's not meant to be a statement of pressure, but hopefully a statement of confirmation. Right now, Ari was speaking earlier about, hey, it's about orbs and like a very real experience most of you have had, because if you've made it this far into this conversation, you are an astrologer, right? Like your transits, say you're in like 9-month-ish Saturn transit. Is it the day where Saturn exactly conjoined your sun? that there's the event that would describe like the initiation of that period of your life. Sometimes, usually not. And if you're in Saturn conjoining your sun by transit, you're probably in five other things too. And so, right, we're also students of cycles and wheels within wheels within wheels, right? So when we look at these many, right, there's this huge thing, this galactic alignment thing. And I'm always so high to speak about that because it's not something most astrologers know, and I think it's the biggest deal. Like it's the biggest astronomical thing that's happening. Therefore, I would suggest the biggest astrological thing that's happening, right? But within that greater context, we have this Venus star shift, which is actually like periods that are longer than Pluto changing signs, Neptune changing signs, Uranus changing signs. But if you look for times when Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus all change signs at the same time, good luck. Happy hunting. Like it is a very, very rare thing. And so we are feeling this great transition. And then let's rewind to the whole point of our conversation. Why might that itself express as some kind of existential crisis? And I want to just say before actually, Ari, maybe I'll ask you to address that question, is this might be me guilty of wanting the astrology to reflect something that I'm personally experiencing, right? And however, I see it in so many of the clients that I'm honored to sit with, but I'm experiencing a very small portion of human beings in the clients that I have. And oftentimes we are kind of calling energetically in people who are resonant with us or going through experience that are resonant with our own, you know? So Ari, I might even ask, is that something that you've noticed in others around you and in your own clients, people who have kind of been full steam ahead in one particular type of career and now they're second guessing or wondering or feeling a
This
shift
is
elsewhere?
in most of my teaching, I've been relating this to the Saturn Neptune, right? And such a powerful transitional point, culminating, dissolving all of the meaning and the structures, Pisces, that we've given. Something new is going to build, but it's very much that transitional energy. So we have Saturn and Neptune completing their cycle, but not yet in the new, completing the zodiac, so to speak, but not yet in Aries, right? It's just a very charged transitional kind of energy. What you've shared is it's also conjunct, literally, the Venus point. Like it's this Saturn, it's also happening. And, for everyone to think of, like, what does it actually mean practically to be tracking the Venus cycle? I mean, Venus is about our own self-value, our embodiment. It's the embodiment of spirit. It's what actually says, I'm here and I want to be here. And it's how we internalize and make life livable and personally meaningful and real for us. So this really strong existential Saturn Neptune transition happening with what's ar arguably we are in the middle of this Venus transition point, whether you use a 10-degree separation or whether you use a conjunction, it's happening. And so this is a very charged point happening at the end of the zodiac, which is actually already very charged. So I've been relating it to, that the Venus adds a dimension. It's clear. I mean, astrology is abstract without personal context. And so we have to look somewhere to then be able to make it personally real. And it's always reflecting our own internal soul process. So I see it everywhere. I'm sure everyone listening can relate to that there's a very palpable sense of transition. In many cases, the structures that we've been building and what we've thought is real and solid is sort of falling apart right now. There's a sense of it doesn't have the same fuel. A metaphor that came to me this morning was relative to Saturn. We get so familiar with the way things are structured. It becomes conditioned, it becomes crystallized, it becomes fixed. So everything about our life and how we've been living is conditioned. And it's really, really, really hard for us to see how we can do something differently. So I'm having this process with my own business and a profound restructuring of not just, how do I sell things? It's literally a restructuring of what is my purpose? What am I here to do? Because we can get so fixed in a certain role and identity and how we're showing up. And then we try to think about how we can, sell better or make more money, right? But we're oftentimes trying to make changes within the framework of an old paradigm. It's like moving the furniture around in a room, but it's like, do I even need to be in this room? So oftentimes there's this complete like take the furniture, take the room, but what would it be like to re-envision your idea of living somewhere? It's like maybe you'll knock down the walls. Maybe you can sell your home and use that money to buy something else. So there's a reforming of the existing material that we've been developing for many, many years, who we've known ourselves to be, but allowing for a new identity to build, allowing for a new way of being here as a human that doesn't keep us stuck within the same literal and metaphorical walls. Because our purpose, and I like to think of it as God's will. Like, what does Creator want of us? What does like the truth? Like, I really think of the evolutionary journey as an inevitability. There's something that happens and wants to happen for each one of us according to its design, the journey home, right? So from that angle, you're kind of speaking to this too. It's like it's happening. You don't have to work hard to make it happen. And then there's always the but, right? There's always the and we can be in resistance to this, and there's a serenity and a peace, and I would say it's a gratitude in recognizing that the force of life wants to take us home. The river wants to move us back to the ocean. And if we recognize that, the journey becomes one of really forgiveness and letting go and releasing and softening, so we can actually become more available to the next phase of experience, which I think right now, you mentioned all of these powerful alignments happening at the beginning of signs. I mean, next year, I think we'll have a almost like a star point. Once Jupiter enters Leo, we'll have a sextile, which will only be completed when, small planets like the moon or whatever enter Sag. Basically, every yang sign, Aries, Gemini, Leo, um, Libra, maybe not Libra. Um, Almost every young sign is going to be matched by a sextile in the early degrees with these outer planets. Pluto in Aquarius, Neptune in Aries, Uranus in Gemini, Jupiter in Leo. It's a very powerful alignment, and that very seldomly happens. And it's happening in conjunction with what you're speaking to. I mean, what you're bringing up around the galactic alignment, which I'm going to have to review some of this, and maybe at some point get to the John Jenkins stuff. But this is basically, we're just beyond the midpoint of our solstice points being exactly aligned with galactic center,
Galactic equator.
at the equator, thank you.
Mhm.
And that we're gonna kind of get out of orb by 2034.
However, because there's
Yeah.
another thing to add there, like with galactic center, that's
Yeah.
another few degrees of precession, right? So galactic center, which we map now at like 27 tropical Sagittarius, will, in 3 more degrees of precession, look like 0 degrees tropical Capricorn.
Right.
And so the good news there, if you will, maybe it's not, is that whether we're looking at this as I've been trained to, and I feel this because I'm very much like a visibly oriented person, like with the galactic equator, which you can actually see in the sky with your eyes, that's centered around 1998. But if you're looking at it with the black hole, that's going to be another few degrees of precession, and that
A
takes
while,
more than
all right.
200 years.
Yeah.
And so I feel that for me as something exciting, and you don't have to do it all right now.
Right.
Like there's still some time, but you're kind of here at the beginning, and it's important to do something. So,
Yeah.
shifts for me, because you said this really important thing, like we're leaning towards the new, but we feel like we have to do this in the old way. This is what we want to transition out of, right? So I've always been spontaneous or Uranian or a channel or whatever, right? And I wake up and I'm inspired to do something and I just do a thing. So the other night I couldn't sleep at all. I had students, I'm currently teaching a Mercury class, and I'm mentioning how just like with Venus, we have these 8-year returns, With Mercury, it alternates between 7 and 6 years. That's more interesting. He does 33 bar beats, or beat bars, 7 6 7 6 7. And so they're hearing me say 6 7 6 7, which is this thing that a lot of the kids are
We have
saying
kids.
now.
Yeah. My
So
5-year-old, I'm like, where did that come from?
6 7, right? So sadly, I looked into where it came from. Unfortunately, most of them don't know, but it's pretty horrific.
I don't want
Yeah,
to
you
know.
don't want to know, right? But so I thought, hey, well, at least I can offer parents, right? We're starting to get it here as well, an opportunity to utilize that 6 7 vehicle as a window to show kids cool things, like the seed of life, which has 7 circles, but it's six around one.
Hmm.
And by the way, that's how you draw the 12 spoked wheel of the zodiac, right? Through the seed, right? It's one of the things that I love teaching. And I want to get back to that as we close. Um, or these Mercury cycles, right? So like let's utilize this weird thing and show cool stuff that we love, right? So anyway, I was up all night, couldn't sleep, pursuing like where did that come from? It's like, oh no. And like this is this thing that happened. Oh no. But we can do this and this. And I'm gonna make a video. And it's like, wait a second, I shouldn't make that video until my new sky school and astronomy teachings are ready to sell. Because I've got to redirect people who are
Right.
interested in this into go buying some tickets for this thing because
Make a
I need
good
to
business
feed
move,
my
yeah.
baby, and it's not easy as we know. But, like sadly to just be somebody who is a star student, a mystic, and wants to help people help themselves by using this amazing craft of astrology, we suddenly are also entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
which I didn't sign up for. Now
Mhm.
I've become an animator, which I love, and all sorts of things, and a storyteller, and but like the entrepreneur piece, like not my happy place. And of course, in all fields, it might not be the people who are at the highest of the game that you're getting access to. You're getting those who can promote their work best or have their work promoted best. And that's just kind of something in the times in which we live, and we wonder if how much of that will persist, right? So when I like look at my own work, I'm so personally fascinated with our sister sciences, with sacred geometry, right now with musical harmony, like in a deep way, in pursuing the harmonic series. And I just want to share this stuff. But that's not necessarily why astrology students came to astrology. Like I feel it's very foundational, but do I need to choose what I'm teaching based upon are there people who want to learn it, right? Or there are people on my mailing list who are attracted to that or whatever, so I can feed my baby, right? I was walking the other day with a friend. We went to a cool stone circle nearby me, a modern stone circle, and I said, you know what, like, this is what I want to do. Like, I love, love, love having the honor of being an astrological counselor. I love teaching astrology and the mystic traditions in general. But I would just build stone circles if that could be my job. And I caught myself saying that. I was like, it can.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
why would I limit myself by just saying this isn't a thing? Like, there's lots of people who want to build something sacred on their land and align it to the directions and to the stars. And I know how to do that because I'm passionate, I'm crazy about it. So why not just start sharing that and see where it goes? Right? So like there's a reminder here. So I'm kind of personally in this existential crisis because work's been slower than it has in some times. And every time that happens, then there's a spark. And I'm reminded it's cool. But it's like I consistently, I feel still where I am, need a reminder to be true to like faith. And so sometimes the slow times are really necessary for me to get out of the, oh my God, what am I going to do? And as a father yourself, Ari, I'm sure you have experienced that that voice gets louder than it used to, right? When you were just in charge of you and. And so, but it's like, wait, just staying true to who I am, keeping faith, like that has always seen me through and it will again, and I'll be fine. And I could be a little bit more active, right? I could do the posts and share the thoughts. And part of that is like, just don't limit yourself from when you are enthusiastic about sharing a thing, needing that to funnel people to something that can sell. Like you don't believe in that. You've been forced to believe in that. Just be you, right? So I think part of my own kind of existential crisis here, some of that looks like, well, the work's been so slow. Is this really what I'm meant to do anymore? Like, I love it, but there's all these other things. How can I find a way for them to have their time and space? And like, if it's not all flowing, and let's not get confused as I do with flow equals abundance in every moment that it's happening, right? But like part of my own personal crisis here, and there is all this retrograde energy as you shared. And for example, this is the first time that Mercury is going to be exploring water cycles since 2019, 2020. And for us to go back to then and think about how everything changed, I think is really important, right? It's like, well, why don't I just get back to the essence of me when I didn't have to worry if there's going to be results? I just
Mhm.
shared because I'm inspired. And by the way, that's been the fuel to launch my craft anyway.
There we go. The form and direction and structure actually happens so effortlessly and organically from that very state. The simi is a Saturn Neptune dynamic because Saturn is the adolescent as much as it's the elder. Saturn says when you're a kid, you shouldn't know, how you're going to make money becoming the fireman, becoming the police officer or the doctor that you want to be when you grow up. It's all held in an imaginal way, and there isn't any kind of crystallization or sense of effort and burden and responsibility when you're just in that place of imagination. And what happens as we become more adulted and focus and fix on the ways that we're living, we get so rigid and stuck in the things that we know. And so we lose that connection to the inspiration. So like what you just shared, Gemini, I feel like is so I relate to that so deeply. As we were driving home, it's funny. So Mars was squaring the nodes. Mars was on my south node in my third house in Sag. So we're on a long road trip. And I'm having all of these amazing realizations about how I've been teaching since I began my training program. I've been teaching it now solidly. I'm in finishing my fifth year. And I love it. And there's a way in which I'm operating in an overly linear way. Like there's a lot of technique, and it's like, that's not my passion. I honor it, respect it, love it. I respect and care about technique and tradition, lineage, right? But like so much effort and energy towards that, it feels like I've gotten so far in the technical realm more than my soul wants. It's like that's not why I'm here. And so I was just sort of having these thoughts, connecting with what do I love doing? And I was conversing with Michelle and using an AI software to kind of articulate some questions and kind of get perspective and information on how certain things can work, a complete restructuring of my business in a way that I can take everything that I've taught and begin to teach in a completely new way that allows for a renewal of where my passion and where my greatest offering really is. So like there's something really exciting beginning to come together. But it's like when I think about what am I here to do, I'm here to make music. It's like that's actually the deepest calling of my soul. And I've never once thought, how am I going to make money doing that? You know? So there's something so deep coming together right now where we don't have to be struggling because we have these amazing gifts and skill, and there's a way for that to be anchored and used in a way where we can have, Saturn, time doesn't have to feel burdensome and heavy and difficult, and we got to constantly monetize our time. I think this is the prayer that I hold for my life, and I think for humanity at large, that as we find more lightness and gentleness and forgiveness in our thinking, we begin to find more ways in which we can live a human life where time is kinder. There's more support, there's more spaciousness, there's more availability. So it's like we get to do with our life what we love. And isn't that what we would want? Like, what's the point of living here if it's all about stress, There has to be something deeper possible in this human existence beyond just the structures that we've known. So, Gemini, before we close, I have to say two things. I want to push, and I've done this before. Please, please, please get into binary star theory.
Well,
My
I'm
int
fascinated by it. Yeah, I read
Because
Crettenden's
I saw what you were doing with that wobble, and I'm like, dude, no, no, no. Precession is not a wobble thing. You know, the reason why
Hold on,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm not wobbling, and still on Earth, that's our experience of it. Like I don't
Oh, is
think
that
of
what you
it
meant by
some
it?
spinning
Okay.
top, you know?
Okay, is that
It's
why you
just
did that?
like, I know that when the moon gets north of Earth, that's the moon ingressing Cancer, but I also know that the moon and Earth are actually dancing about one another as we dance about the sun, right? But I
Because what I
want
would do with your map, instead of wobbling it, I would just be moving it with my hands.
But you wouldn't see what's happening. So I'm a believer in that in some regards, trying to ditch belief in general. But yeah, so that was one thing. You said there was going to be another.
Um, and I was wondering, have you explored applying the precession rate being at an increase right now? That there seems to be a progressive increase in precession. I wonder if you've been working with that at all.
I work in our app right now. We're working with a fixed rate. One of the reasons there is it's very difficult to add a dynamic rate.
Right.
It's like so much more complicated, and it gets a little bit beyond what I need to be concerned with right now. Now, if we're going to start looking at great cycles and thousands of years in the past and thousands of the years in the future, it's really important. Right now, our next step will be moving through a few different options for fixed rates, but dynamic rates are going to be much more difficult. I will say, like, the measurements of dynamic rates have been happening in such a small amount of time that I don't have any faith in them right now yet.
Okay.
I think that they're interesting, but when you start pursuing like other views of some of that data, there's enough contradiction that I'm not like on one side of the thing or the other. I try my best to stay open. I'm not great at it, but I do what I can, right? I
Yeah.
want to just reflect on a couple things as we close. First of all, like, yes, to music. You're such a wonderful music, more and more of it. Music is astrology, right? I've been having like the most musical month of my life since I was a professional musician, I think, right
Awesome.
now. And it's just so wonderful. And the music is such an opportunity to have an embodied experience, sorry, of the astrology and vice versa. Like my astrological understanding has informed my understanding of harmony, like my study of music never did. And they're really just starting to blossom and working with many great musicians right now to pursue some of the theories and have opportunities to hear this and share this like in an embodied sensual way. It's like such a huge part of like my near future that I'm so excited to share
Cool.
it. So
That's
saxophone is
wonderful.
not too far from me, or I'm not too far from a piano right now. Um, you mentioned Saturn Neptune many times, and so I wanted to just share this image metaphor that's come in recently. So as we know, Saturn is now going to pass Neptune, right? And we in the last few years have been counseling many, including ourselves, who had like a Neptune transit to a significant part of our song, part of our chart. And then Saturn came and did a thing.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I found myself, especially when those periods were close to one another, as they have been over the last few years, often offering this metaphor that seemed to really work for people, which was Neptune came in, you're lost at sea. The fog is here. There's no reason to white knuckle grip that boat's steering wheel. It's gonna do you no good. Release the wheel, let the storm blow you to where you're meant to be, and you will find yourself on new land. And then when Saturn comes in, it's like, yeah, here's this new land. You're safe. Like, kiss the ground. And where does your food come from? What is this place? How are you going to map it? How do you relate to this land? How can it embrace you? That kind of thing, right? So now we're moving into this new period of Saturn first and then Neptune.
Hmm.
And so I found myself searching for the metaphor. And I've only tested it a couple times because the difference between Saturn transit followed by a Neptune transit to that same point. Like that's really going to be in the next few years, so we'll see. But the image that came in is this, and I think it's appropriate for this conversation as well. Um, you're dying of thirst in the burning desert. And you're walking as far as your strength can take you, so you will survive. And there, you've made it. There's an oasis in front of you. And beautiful, pristine pools of water beneath date palms and the whole thing. Now, the issue is you might feel inclined not even to take a sip because the last 5 times you tried sipping that oasis water, you realized it was a mirage as you drank a mouthful of sand. Right? And so now you've gotten quote unquote wise and you know the oasis is a mirage, but the trick is this time it's not. And so there really is this kind of test of faith and of independent and individual will to know that despite how things have been, that does not define how they will be.
Hmm.
And if there's oasis water, take a drink.
Okay, I'm going to expand upon that. There's hesitancy in investing more faith and trust in more structure. This might fail us again. I might be deluding myself. I don't want to sacrifice and give all this meaning and energy and time to something that actually is just another good idea.
Mm,
Am I falling into patterns of suppression and just trying to be something that I'm not? So there's a little bit of a pause and after all this disillusionment and shedding, but this Aries leading, I just love how you bring in sort of it's a very embodied, practical, visual. Just bow and honor the way you hold astrology in that way, brother. It's just beautiful. Saturn leading, no, it's moving forward in Aries, it comes first and Neptune follows. And that will be further clarified over the next year or two as they create more separation, meaning more objectivity, more perspective. Saturn here says there is a strengthening in self-trust. I can trust myself to actually connect with my own embodied direct knowing of purpose. What am I choosing? And I can trust that my choosing is informed by a deep relationship to my higher calling and purpose. So I'm going to experience the universe, life, the Tao, Neptune at my back, following Saturn. I can make choices and changes and actually trust my own co-creative agency to practically engage in long-term experience because this will not be adding more stuff and obscuring reality, but actually using the things of reality to create something meaningful. And I'll be aligned with my inspiration and my joy, and the Tao will support and follow me along.
mm.
I'm going to actually I'm in this desert and there's water there. I'm actually going to uh trust myself to even build infrastructure to make this water accessible and build a well and collect rainwater and make an actual ecosystem that I can live into and not just depend on things working or not working, but really trust that I'm a part of the process and I can make real changes and real choices.
Love that. So much wisdom. I love the way you talk story in such a way that it can be received and we can take action, which can be an Aries thing. I want to mention again, because I'd like to share this on my channel too, that when Ari speaks about the Binary Research Institute, there's another book you've got to check out, which is amazing, and it's by Walter Cruttenden, and it's called The Lost Star of Myth and Time, which is such a wonderful text. I really highly recommend it. And he's kind of working on inspiration through Sri Yari Yukteswar's The Holy Science, which is a book like this that's like this. And
Exactly. And even
very,
it's really just like the first chapter that he's working with.
yeah, right, like the
Yeah.
prologue
The
almost.
pro,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a couple pages.
Yeah, but Lost Star of Myth and Time was a very inspirational read for me. Um, and I do appreciate that our experience of precession, I really have a hard time with astronomers these days teaching it like it's because Earth is a spinning top.
Right.
It's
Good.
like, what
Yeah.
are we spinning on? But some interesting things that I think this came to me through John Major Jenkins is that our precessional rate is about 26,000 years, and we're like 26,000 light years from galactic center,
Mm.
and that electrons precess and the rate of their precession will have to do with their distance from the nucleus. And so that's all fascinating.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then the other thing that I just wanted to share is this. When we talk about moving away from Kali Yuga, for example, where, I mean, there's so much ancient transmission scripture and like in the yuga speaking about how this is a time of our greatest materialism, like our most fixed, our most gross, our less our greatest distance from the awareness of spirit. And when we're in, let's call it the golden age so it gets across, that's not only the time when we're closest to the divinity, but we understand the divinity is in us.
Yeah.
And may Neptune's journey into Aries help us understand like the Atman and the Brahman are not different, right? In English, right? Like there is a beautiful spiritual divinity in each and every one of us. And when we connect to that individually, we are going to share the music of this beautiful new age where things will be more spacious. I just want to also celebrate what you were saying in your beautiful prayer of like, let's let time treat us each better. And look, musically, like we get to choose the tempo
Hmm.
and we get to choose how many notes we play to either fully fill a bar or maybe choose for those spaces to have more rest than sound, right? And I think that's a really important part of this time ahead of us. Like the words like taking personal responsibility feels like weight, but understanding that we have um, a personal power
Yeah.
to create our reality and experience the reality that we have. That like joy is a choice and it's not a goal, it's something that we do along the way.
Beautiful. All right. So we'll close it there. Thank you for joining me in this conversation. As always, it's a great journey. All right. So everyone, check out Gemini's work. If you're watching my channel, it is in the description. And thank you all for watching.
And if you're watching mine, so GeminiBrett.com for me. What about for you, Ari?
arimoshe.com.
There it is. Until next time, brother. Thank you so much for the invite. So wonderful to spend some
Yeah.
time together
Yeah,
and get technical and get into the important stuff.
exactly.